Catherine the Great was Russia's great empress in the 1700s. She had a field marshal named Grigory Potemkin who organized a tour for her of southern Russia. And the tour was planned over a 4-year period and covered a distance of 1,000 miles. The problem was that this section of Russia was incredibly poor and was not going to look very good. But this General Potemkin really wanted to impress Catherine the Great. So what he did was he created fake villages. And he basically created happy peasants who basically he moved over in the evenings from one village to another so that as she passed by these villages over 1,000 miles, it looked like everything was beautiful and everybody was happy as these subjects lined the streets. The problem was it was all a fake. And so a term entered our vocabulary, at least in English, called a Potemkin village. And it refers to an impressive facade or a show, something created to hide something undesirable on the inside. So in the same way spiritually, it's easy and tempting to have a spirituality that looks good on the outside without having very much beneath or behind it. So for example, a person can attend church or read their Bible, even sing and worship and live a respectable life, but be so caught up in the culture and the busyness around us that we end up like a Potemkin village. We don't have the time to open up our interior lives for Jesus to change us or to develop our own firsthand relationship with him. So the EHS course was developed over many years to address this crisis of discipleship in the church today. Our intention has been to introduce you to a deep beneath the surface spirituality that we hope will serve as a framework for the rest of your discipleship journey. In this 8-session course, our goal has been to introduce you to 8 critical themes of discipleship that are often ignored in our churches. We began with the problem of emotionally unhealthy spirituality as we looked at Saul, who had neither a contemplative life with God nor an emotional maturity. Then we looked at number 2, know yourself that you may know God, and the life of David. Then we moved on to going back to go forward, and Joseph and how our family histories impact who we are today. Then we moved to journey through the wall, and we looked at Abraham and God's call to sacrifice Isaac and how we all hit walls. Then we talked about enlarging your soul through grief and loss and how that is an indispensable issue of discipleship that we all have to move through and learning to let go as we hit losses in life. Then we talked about discovering the rhythms of daily office and Sabbath, and you've been on this whole journey with us of rhythms in your days and weeks. And then we talked about last week growing into an emotionally mature adult and the importance of learning skills for that. And this week we've talked about going the next step to develop a rule of life, looking at the early church in Acts chapter 2. So in this final session, you hopefully identified 1 or 2 practical steps that God's inviting you to take as our course concludes. However, it's important that we keep perspective on how slowly we learn and change. Benjamin Boom was a great educational psychologist who, along with a team of thinkers, developed a brilliant way of looking at how people learn. And this has been adapted and revised many times over the last 60 years, and it continues to be a standard in many educational systems around the world. But I have found it very helpful as I've looked at the discipleship journey. And Bloom distinguishes 5 levels of knowing or getting a value or getting something. We tend to think in one of 2 ways. I know something or I don't know something. For example, I value caring for the poor or I don't value caring for the poor. What we don't always understand is that it takes a long time and many small incremental steps to really get a new value or a truth. And I find this very helpful as we think about all these profound concepts we've talked about in these 8 sessions here of Emotionally Healthy Spirituality course. And it requires we actually move through 5 distinct levels. Let me illustrate this with my own journey of coming to the value of slowing down my life to spend more time with Jesus. Level 1, he calls awareness. And for me, it was slowing down. I'd say, well, slowing down is an interesting idea. I first thought about this in a serious way in 1994 when I was experiencing pain in both my personal life and in my leadership. The second phase is ponder. I was like, okay, God, help me understand more about slowing down. And so when I began this emotionally healthy journey in 1996, I read books, I listened to messages on slowing down. I even preached some sermons on it. The third is we begin to value it. We say, wow, I really believe this is important. Everybody needs to slow down. I dabbled in some new behaviors like Sabbath and silence and stillness, and I had some one-day retreats with God. But my actions and behaviors did not fundamentally change for years. There was a big gap there, as you'll notice, before number 4, which is prioritize. That's where I say I'm shifting my entire life around as I slow down to be with Jesus. That's finally happened for me in 2003, 2004, where I reprioritized my time, my energy, and my schedule in order to integrate this new learning and value into my life. This helped me really kickstart a whole new way of leading and living out this value. It was life-changing for me. And the 5th stage, says Bloom, is own it. That is where all my decisions and all my actions are based on this new value. It's so in me, I don't even think about it. So it's moving from prioritizing to owning. That actually took me another 6-7 years. I had a lot of work to do to integrate this one value with all of its demands and challenges into actually being a pastor and leader at our church. So while I still fall at times, slowing down to be with Jesus now informs all that I do. My entire body feels it when I don't. In fact, others around me can see it as well when I violate this value. So you'll notice how the chart highlights the large gap between levels 3 and levels 4, value and prioritize. Why? Because that's the point that requires a radical, often difficult shift. Many people love the ideas and principles of emotionally healthy spirituality. They believe they're biblical. However, moving from valuing it, these things you've learned, and prioritizing it is a very big challenge. So let me encourage you. The changes you seek from what you learned in the EHS course will not happen overnight, but they will happen over time if you persevere. So take, for example, the topic of going back to go forward, or how the past impacts our following of Christ. After 20 years, my understanding of this continues to deepen and mature. The same goes for the wall, for example, in session 4, and how indispensable biblical grief and loss are for becoming a mature follower of Jesus, session 5. I continue to deepen my understanding of Sabbath and the daily office of silence and solitude and stillness. So take your time. Stay with it. Entrust yourself to God's care and ask Him to lead you into the next step of your process. Tens of thousands of people around the world are on this journey with you and are experiencing powerful transformation in both their personal lives and in their churches. Stay with it, taking one step at a time. It's an exciting journey, and I promise you, neither you nor those around you will ever be the same.